on the 21st of March in 2020 was our first show. And so this now is pretty much the 5 year anniversary show of Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. So welcome, and boy, we've a lot has changed, and maybe very little has changed since we revisit the show after 5 years and see what's happened since then. At least we're not all afraid of dying from COVID like we were at the start of the show. Sort of.
Yeah, a buddy at work had it, and everybody was pretty nonchalant. He'll be fine, and nobody was, oh my God, I hope I don't get it. 5 years ago, when you heard something like that, you were freaking out. You were in the same vicinity as somebody who had it. Oh my God, what if I get it? What if I pass it on to my wife or somebody? Now it's
Well,
much more.
there's treatments now, that you can take the Pavloxin or whatever and take it, within 5 days of getting it. And usually then it just turns it into just a very bad cold. And people, sadly have had it multiple times, and now since it came out. But there's, the vaccine and everything. The hospitals aren't jammed up with COVID patients. So I think that has a lot to do with the less panic that we had when we didn't even know, when you and I started the show, we didn't know if COVID was airborne or if you got it by touching things or
People are
was it,
washing their mail.
yes, or leaving it untouched for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And I knew people that were, as soon as they got home from work, they were, undressing completely and running right into the shower like it was a Silkwood, like they were involved in Silkwood, and think about all the wrestling shows that had no audiences, had that weird wall of TVs, that was that was really,
Unwatchable.
and it was just weird. It was Orwellian in a lot of ways to just see like people just on TV, like watching TVs, watching wrestling. It just was. I do think that we will revisit that time and just go, wow, what a bunch of weirdos we were. But again, we didn't know any better, and we all were just sort of thrown in the same boat all at the same time, and didn't know exactly how to react.
Well, the other side of it is I had 5 friends die, and 10 of one of my adult students told me that 10 of her relatives in India died, 10 relatives. So it's not that it was just wildly exaggerated. I mean, we had 800 people a day dying in Queens, New York, because we were like, with the exception of China, obviously, we were the epicenter, Kennedy and LaGuardia airports, people coming in from all over the world and all over the country. Kennedy's International. So, I mean, it was very real and very scary. And yeah, you probably shouldn't have kept kids out of school that long. And some things might have been, you know, overreacting. But at the same time, it was real, and a lot of people died, and a lot of people got sick. And
Yeah, 1 million Americans basically died from it. I mean, you think about like 1 in 300 people dying from it. That is actually significant.
I think we have more like 350 million, but even so, one out of 350 is a big number. I mean, especially when you know some of them. People are very nonchalant when people throw stats, but if it's your friend or your relative, or then all of a sudden it's more meaningful. And I think a lot of people don't have a lot of empathy because it didn't affect them directly. But in New York, it was a big, big deal, boy, especially in Queens where I am. Um, I was teaching one day, and I talk about this in my book. I was teaching and I get a call from the principal. We're shutting down. We're shutting down. And students walked out with like, their heads hanging, everybody was upset. Then I went to the gym. We're shutting down. Then I went to the local diner where I always ate at, and he's like, "We're shutting down." I mean, permanently. He goes, "I can't survive on takeout." And 1 out of 4 restaurants in America closed. So it was pretty brutal, and it affected wrestling and everything, and it affected us. And then we started the show. It was something that we looked forward to once a week with all the misery and the tedium, I should say. And once a week, it was like an hour of therapy, and we invited good people on. And 5 years later, we're still doing it. And there's shows with more viewers or whatnot and more clicks, but the show is from the heart. And we've had some good people on this show who have died during the 5 years, so it's good to honor them too. And
Yeah, in fact, I was going to ask you, like, what are some of your favorite shows that we've done in the 5 years that we've been doing this?
um, we've had some really, really sharp people who deserve a wider audience or whatnot, which is kind of my mantra, indie everything. And when you get somebody like an Angel Orsini or a Hollywood from Glow, or they may not be household names, but they've really done a lot and accomplished a lot, and eclectic. And we've had some very interesting people. And we've also lost some people that were on the show, like Lanny Poffo, who was more eclectic and interesting than Lanny. Oh my God, the guy really was a genius. He had encyclopedic memory. He memorized epic length poems and show tunes, and yeah, we've had some great people on, and some more famous than others. But I was just having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and I'm not even going to name names. You have these big time wrestling podcast, big name host, and they spend their shows, imaginary WrestleMania bookings and tearing down AEW. And I'm like, 2 wrestlers died in the past week. Died, collapsed in ring. Okay, and maybe that deserved a few minutes of their shows, and talking about their GoFundMe's, which could have helped. Vince Steele. This is a horror story. We had Tommy Rich in town, and we got him multiple bookings. And one of the bookings, I get him on this indie wrestling show, Free Combination Wrestling. It was in New Jersey, small indie show. And Tommy's sitting there, and the guy collapses in ring at 20 feet in front of him. It dies. He said to me, in 50 years of wrestling, I've never experienced something like this. And it shook him up, because in wrestling, they know what the other guys have gone through. And it's even harder for the other guys because they never, quote unquote, made the big time. So there were wrestling fans today. Another indie wrestler collapsed in ring. Didn't die in the ring like Vince, but died, on the way to the hospital or whatnot.
Who was this?
Artist Test, who I don't know, different part of the country, but Sammy Callahan and Ace Austin, from what I understand, trained him. And, they were devastated. These are brothers who they go up and down the highways, up and down the roads with. So when I had fans say to me today, I didn't hear about these two guys dying. Dying. I'm like, why in a course of a 1 or 2 hour show, the endless minutia? Oh, after WrestleMania, you could have The Rock and Cody tag team or whatnot, or it's like, who gives a shit? Two guys died. Take a few minutes and talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind people, talking about the extended fantasy of, possible bookings. But I agree with you if you hear about the news of someone like that dying, and also not that it was a tragic death, but the loss of Bill Mercer. That's a legend as far as legends go. You don't get more legendary announcing than Bill Mercer.
Yeah, but
And
Bill Mercer, the
oh,
news just
yeah,
came out this evening.
right.
I'm talking in the course of the week, these two wrestlers died, and a lot of people did not know about it or didn't hear about it because it's not to the clickbait boys and the podcast big wigs. I'm not making a blanket statement. Chris Jericho donated $1,000. He has a good heart, but I'm
Yeah, that
saying
was
that.
that was really wonderful of him to do that. That was
Yeah.
really
So you have a 39-year-old father, three kids. The family's devastated. They lost their dad. You're a father. You have two kids. So you got three kids without a dad. Maybe, just maybe, instead of bitching about Tony Khan and AEW and hyping WrestleMania and giving free publicity to $1 billion corporation, take a minute or two. Here's the GoFundMe. Vince Steele, GoFundMe, okay? And we encourage you to donate. It doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much. Really. It's like ass backward. Oh, and today, here's another thing that's ass backward. Guy says to me, what's really important today are the entrances and the theme music and not the match itself. I said, okay, then they threw the baby out with the bathwater because when I was watching Saturday Night Main Event and Jey Uso's walking to the ring for 10 minutes and everybody's yeeting, okay, that's entertaining. But mid-match, that two lengthy commercial breaks where there's 15 or 20 commercials between them, which absolutely killed the match, the priorities have shifted from the wrestling to the entrance. And I think that's absurd. And people are arguing with me. You're wrong. It's about the fans being part of the WWE experience, and it's not about the wrestling. Okay. Well, then you geniuses pay $66 to over $1,000 a ticket for a WWE house show at the
well.
Garden.
That's a
And I won't.
that's a perfect segue because my brother and his friend and also a close friend of mine, Ari, there was wrestling this weekend in Sacramento, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we should go." And they looked, and the cheapest seats at the top of Golden One Center in Sacramento. And I've been to Golden One. I've been at the top, so I know how far up that is.
You've been to the mountaintop.
I have. I mean, and you do kind of need oxygen to once you're up there. And they were $160.
WWE?
Yes.
Base value?
Yes.
Wow.
$160, and anything like even like lower was then starting at $230 and going upwards.
So when I say they're disgusting greed monger corporate vultures, then other people say, no, it's what the market will bear. And I say, yeah, well, tell that to the dads who have to tell their children, son, daughter, whatever the case may be, daddy doesn't have the money to take you. I can't afford a $500 night out at a WWE
No,
show.
but what this does do is it drives people towards the indies, which is a good thing. It does mean that, you know what, Junior, no, we're not going to go see the WWE, but you can show your children that when money becomes too overwhelming, that there are alternatives. You don't have to take, if McDonald's is selling a $10 Big Mac, you don't have to go to to buy a $10 Big Mac. You can go to a restaurant, a local restaurant, near you, get the same burger for $6. Okay, so that is the thing: is that people thinking that the only alternative there is the WWE really need to start thinking outside the box and saying, we don't have to go to an overpriced AEW or WWE show. There are lots of great indie shows all the time in every area in the United States, no matter where you look. You don't have to look that hard to find a show going on.
Well, that goes back to my original point. Then it would be awfully nice if these big time, big name podcasters embraced an indie and said, "Hey, I really recommend, these guys, and even champion a young indie guy like we had on Cha Cha Charlie."
Absolutely.
And I mentioned guys like Leo Sparrow, who
Eric Adams, another great guy.
Yeah. So the point being, give these guys the rub. You have a zillion listeners on some big time podcast, and I heard there's 50,000 wrestling podcasts out there now, and the big ones. If you took 2 minutes out of a 2-hour show or whatnot, whatever they are, and say, "Hey, here's the indie I want to plug this week that really deserves your support," it wouldn't be that big a deal.
No, but that's why I'm proud of what we've done. I mean, we've had JJ McGuire on our show. We had Lanny on our show. We had my good friend Tony Jones on the show. And in that sense, those moments that we have these people on that then are no longer with us, those become priceless to me. And like the entire reason why I've done this show is I have that interview with Tony Jones forever, and part of my archives. And I can revisit that when I miss him and want to hear his voice and want to hang out with him again,
Well, that's one of the beautiful things about YouTube and social media. Every once in a while, I'll see a not super famous wrestler or musician or actor, who's being fondly remembered, and it's a little piece of immortality. And that show, which let's say a Tony Jones who was revered by his peers and his friends and his family. Yes, that 1 hour is preserved forever, and his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren can tune into that, and that becomes, here's the irony, that show with Tony Jones, who was not the most famous wrestler to ever get in the ring, becomes more valuable than a show over analyzing a meaningless Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, whatever the case may be, because years from now, nobody's going to care. It's just an old wrestling show. Nobody's going to care. But the family and friends and fans of a Tony Jones will have
and myself
and yourself will have that, and create art. Don't create content. Everybody's worried about the clicks. Oh, I don't want to bum out my audience by talking about a wrestler dying. Well, then maybe some of these people are not the most sensitive people in the world, because maybe raising a few bucks for a Vince Steele's family and 3 kids who lost the breadwinner, they could, maybe that's more important. Maybe it's more important, and certainly more important than talking about Jey Uso's, Jey Uso's path to the gold.
Or the
Really,
friendship bracelet. I know
the
you're a
friendship
big fan
race.
of. Yeah, you're a big fan of that angle. I mean, this is the portrait that you painted when you created the wrestler. Or helped create the wrestler. Is of that the other 99% of the wrestling populace that doesn't make a living, doesn't make a fortune. It's not Hulk Hogan or Goldberg or The Undertaker.
Well, the irony is that 95% of any artist, whether you're a writer, actor, singer, rapper, wrestler, whatever the case may be, 95% are not going to become rich and famous. Maybe another 5% may pay the bills, but barely. The average actor makes poverty wages. They're not multi-million, million dollar salaries. Most actors, they're struggling. And there's been stories recently about guys who are on hit TV shows, and years later they have a day job. And I think there's a misconception. Oh, he's on TV or she's in a movie, she must be incredibly rich. It's a real misconception. I mean,
Well,
you could have a class.
Brian Knobs is basically got a GoFundMe now, for
Well, not
himself.
basically. There is one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, he was supposed to be good friends with Hulk Hogan, and we know Hulk Hogan, despite all the divorces and lawsuits and all the other things, he's worth millions and millions of dollars. I mean, he may not have the money he thinks that he should deserve, because I think a guy like Hulk Hogan never thinks he has enough money as he deserves. But to have supposedly a good friend of yours have to get a GoFundMe account to take care of medical bills when you yourself are hawking at the same time, running around hawking beer, and selling,
And
your
$425 autographs.
yeah, $425 autographs, stiffing people who've waited 2 hours to see you, or longer than that, 7 hours to see you, saying that, well, at number 185, I don't have time to see you guys. And I said I'd see 200, but you're 185, and I've had enough of today, so I'm just going to walk out.
By the way, WWE just canceled his originally $9,950 meet and greet at WrestleMania. The whole thing got pulled. They yanked it today.
Wow. Well, I mean, again, despite all of that, if he was a good friend of Brian Knobs, like he said, he's had him on his TV show and all that, there's no reason that Knobs should have to get a GoFundMe, And if he did have a GoFundMe, the number one name at the top of the GoFundMe should be Hulk Hogan. And it shouldn't be just like $1,000, it should be like $1 million, because he has that money. He really does. And I'm not trying to spend his money for him, but if I had a good friend and I was a multimillionaire and my good friend was on the brink of death, so bad that he had to ask the public for a GoFundMe, I would say, no, you don't have to do that. Here's whatever you need. I mean, isn't that the way good friends are supposed to be? Isn't that the way, loyalty is supposed to pay itself back over the years?
I saw an article the other day. Two people worked in the same school, and one guy desperately needed a kidney, or he was going to die. Teacher wasn't even close friend. Teacher gave the guy a kidney. So there's extremes of selflessness, and there's extremes of selfishness, and people have different character and different personality. My closest friend is well off, and I know if I was ever in need, the guy would be there for me. It's like having an unwritten insurance policy, but I'm financially responsible. I'm not
You're not depending on it. It's not something that, but if something tragic happened to you, I would hope that you wouldn't have to go to a GoFundMe to be able to take care of
no,
yourself.
this guy would be there for me. And you know, there have been people that have publicly stated a true friend, like a soldier. A soldier will take a bullet for one of his fellow, soldiers. And if a car was so for example, Russell, you're a father. If a car was coming towards one of your kids, you would push your kids out of the way and take the hit, no doubt. But here's the theory: a true friend would do the same.
At least one of
Car's
them. I
barreling
would for
toward.
at least one of them. I would for at least one of them.
Yeah.
And I won't tell you which one, and I won't tell them which one. I have to keep them guessing so they'll treat me nice.
So that's funny. The car. So if a car was coming towards your brother or your best friend, you have a split second to make that decision. Am I going to push the guy out of the way and take the hit or not?
Absolutely. No, and you would for Hong and you would for probably for your cats these days too. When you show that you care for something, it should be money shouldn't be what comes into mind, and it shouldn't matter what it takes to be able to, show what people mean to you, and that to me, that's what money is for, instead of just trying to hoard onto it. It's kind of funny that Hulk Hogan, is trying for these $10,000 autograph sessions and $450 an autograph and all that stuff. Because we just lost George Foreman, and one of the side stories about the George Foreman death is that Hulk Hogan was originally offered the grill that became the George Foreman grill, and he turned it down so that he could sell a meatball maker, which obviously nobody has because they never made any of them because it was a total disaster.
And he's a meatball.
And he is a meatball, and meanwhile George Foreman made $200 million off of the George Foreman grill.
He made more money. He made more money off of the grill than he did in boxing as heavyweight champion of the world.
Oh, by by a factor of like 100. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
As a lifelong boxing fan, let me say, except for Larry Holmes, all the greats from that era are gone. Ali, Frazier, Foreman, Shavers, Lyle, all the heavyweight greats from that era. And it's not conducive to longevity to get punched in the head by super heavyweights. It's just not healthy. And it's a brutal, brutal business. And any business that you're using your body, generally a lot of the participants don't end well. Boxing, wrestling, MMA, porn, whatever the case may be. If your body wears out after a while, and it's just
well, in defense of MMA, the one thing I can say in defense of MMA is that your whole body's a target, so you don't tend to take as many just pure shots to the head as you do in boxing, where the head is the main target, and in wrestling, when chair shots were a dime a dozen, and guys were constantly getting hit on the head with chairs, and headbutts off the top rope, and guys going headfirst into the corner post, and getting DDT'd on the concrete and so forth.
Yeah.
That sort of thing was, people just didn't realize how much head trauma. You'd think, well, getting hit on the head, would cause problems, but I guess we look as a society, and we really didn't think that it was serious, that these guys, were getting walloped on the head night after night after night until the Benoit situation came really
well. Guys
forward.
like Mike Awesome killed themselves, and you don't know why. I mean, these guys had multiple concussions, a lot of them, and it's I've had indie friends say to me, I've had 12 concussions, 14, 16, and they're so consumed with it all. They're in their 30s, 40s. They don't want to give it up. They like being with the boys, being on the road. They feel alive in the ring. They feel dead at their crap 9 to 5. And I'm going back in. And what do you think, Evan? And I'm a friend. I go, I think you want to recognize your kids. I think that's more important than going back in the ring in front of 100 people on an indie show. Honestly, not that I don't love and support indie wrestling, but I think at some point you have to realize this is not healthy for you. And I mean, they'll actually say to me in their 30s and 40s, yeah, I have a little memory loss already. I've had all these concussions. I'm like, don't you want to be in good health for your kids? It's it is what it is.
Then there's situations like with my friend Virgil Flynn and Mark Smith and even Tony Jones. If they'd never wrestled a day in their lives, they still probably would have had their lives end right when it did. Because I don't think wrestling had anything to do with any of those folks. I mean, Virgil had an aneurysm in his brain, which can happen at any time. My friend Mark Smith had the faulty heart valve, which can happen anytime. And I still am not clear on what happened to Tony Jones, just a heart attack, but they never explained what the problem was from, where the heart attack
Sometimes you're just a big guy, and there's too much weight on the heart.
Yeah, or it's just a defect that you've always had in there, and nobody. Especially when people don't have autopsies and they order that, they say in their final request not to have an autopsy. You're never really sure what happened to them. So, it, and I know that for all these people that I mentioned, the idea that they would live their lives without wrestling as part of it is not thinkable. They would have never been happy if they hadn't done their time in the ring and tried to reach that goal of being, a big time wrestler. And that goal will always be there.
Speaking of that, Homicide just wrestled his last match, and I've been going to see him since he was a kid down at the Doghouse, and he's actually in our movie Wrestling Then and Now, which we did in 2002. And he publicly said on Facebook, on social media, he has a cyst in his brain, and it's affecting his vision, and it's affecting. It's just it was time to walk away, and this is all he's known, and this is what he loves, and he's an artist. If you've I'm this show is coast to coast. I'm East Coast, and I've seen him live dozens and dozens of times. And this guy, every time he walked in the ring, he left it in the ring. This guy was the real deal. Ring of Honor, TNA with LAX, and Indies, and for the life of me, I don't know why WWE never gave him a chance. I guess because he was too small. But maybe
it's all for the better. We've seen how they've treated some great wrestlers like Nakamura and Gallows and Anderson. Sometimes, it's all for the best that some guys didn't go to WWE.
Well, here's the thing. Homicide, when he had his last match, which was just on Thursday night in Brooklyn, people were crying, because this is his art. That ring is his canvas.
Absolutely.
Say.
Well, technically and literally.
Yeah, and it was very emotional for the people that he came up with, and for his fans that he was leaving. And yes, maybe had he gone to WWE, it would have been the reverse, where a guy like Nakamura, who was top 5 in the world with New Japan, just devolved into another warm body on a card, putting out vanilla, instantly forgettable matches, and sacrificing his legacy for a good paycheck, which in the old days we would call a sellout. And people get angry at me. They go, well, he's lived a good life and he supported his family and he likes to surf. And I go, yeah, but you're sacrificing your art for the almighty dollar. And I don't see it personally. I've told this story before on this show. When we did The Wrestler, I'm sitting alone with Aronofsky at his office, and he he couldn't get the funding. We wanted to raise 18 million for The Wrestler. We could only get 6 because Mickey's star had waned at the time, and we could have had Nicolas Cage, who was the #1 box office star in the world. At the time, we actually, you're talking 2007, 2008, and we actually met with him, and nice enough guy. But Aronofsky looks at me and he goes, Evan, Mickey's the right guy. So sometimes you go with your heart, with the art, not for like what's more marketable, what's more profitable. And to his credit, Homicide created art every night he was out there. And Nakamura, this is ironic. Nakamura and AJ Styles at Wrestle Kingdom for New Japan had a classic match. Then they wrestled again at WrestleMania, and it was a shell of what it was.
I was just about to say that. Yes, they had the same match in the WWE, but it was booked just awful, and it really underdid, I think, both of their careers in a lot of ways. Sadly,
I saw AJ Styles and Randy Orton at Madison Square Garden, and it was instantly forgettable. It was just another night out for these guys. And people will say, and I remember how great AJ Styles was in TNA and, in the Indies and everything else. Sometimes that big paycheck is wonderful, but it's not the be all and end all, because the art you create is what's going to survive. And if you don't follow Japanese wrestling, you're never going to see Nakamura at his best. That I can tell you.
Well, when you want to talk about art that survives, it's a good segue for us to talk about Bill Mercer. Because sure. Bill Mercer, for me, is as legendary a voice. I mean, I put him on the same level as like Gordon Solie, as far as a guy that I listened to so much of my youth was spent listening to Bill Mercer call the world class stuff and various NWA matches. I mean, he's 99 years old, so he
was so young. He was so young.
As my grandmother said, he died from nothing. She said, anytime you're a day over 80, if you die, you died from nothing.
I don't want to die at 99. I want to die at 98 or 100, because at 99, I'm already planning the big 100th birthday party.
Right.
I'd be
People
disappointed.
Say you missed it by that much.
That's right. I don't want to die at 99.
But Bill Mercer, I mean, he's synonymous with that kind of Mid-South, Mid-Atlantic wrestling era when things were, I think, at the highest level of the territories. I feel like that was when you really had some great stars in every federation and all these, smaller divisional areas. And Mercer was great at really like calling the action, getting people
treated it like a sport.
Treated it like a sport. Getting people whipped up for the Freebirds. The Freebirds versus the Von Erichs. Those were his call of the action was really on target and really got you excited for it. And he never looked at getting himself over. He never got involved in any shtick or anything like that. He never talked about himself. He always just focused on the action. And right now, the announcers, to me, are totally dime a dozen. A lot of times for the WWE shows, I literally am not paying any attention to what the announcers are saying. Not one bit. They add nothing to the action.
The spin now, it's interesting. In recent weeks, I'm seeing Michael Cole is the greatest of all time.
Okay,
And
now I just
and
no,
I
no.
go, the guy's shrill and he's a shill and he's a pounding in my head. And Gordon Soley turns in his grave 3 times every time Cole is screaming. Cole called somebody a prick, one of the wrestlers, I forget who. Um, like as he's calling the match, like he's part of the show now. He's that
And that sort of thing never happened with Bill Mercer.
right.
That's my point, is that you never thought about him as an announcer. You just listened to his words, and his words mixed with what was going on in the ring so much that you couldn't separate the two. There wasn't a point, a jumping off point where there was commentary and then there was action. The action and the commentary were seamless. And God damn it, I wish there was a kind of announcing crew out right now that was that good, but there isn't. There isn't. And it shocks me that the announcing part of all of the feds has really gone by the wayside. And it's not, you don't have people that are great at I mean, I think Nick Aldis is probably the next best guy that's on the mic, or when they get MJF to go and do commentary. He's fantastic. But everybody else leaves me cold. Cold,
Nigel McGuinness does it straight.
Oh,
I kind of
Nigel's
like
great too.
him.
Let me correct that. Nigel's fantastic also.
Uh,
But everybody
I,
else is just
I,
awful.
I WWE. It's almost like it's exhausting. It's draining. You got that Pat McAfee. He's screaming and yelling and jumping like he's the show, and it's a distraction from what's going on in the ring a lot of times. And I mean, yeah, I appreciate his enthusiasm, but
And
it's
there's also not a
draining.
lot of chemistry between the announcing groups. I guess that was one thing, is that when you had like JR and the King, when you had Bobby Heenan,
Monsoon and
obviously,
Heenan,
yeah, is the gold standard there. But even when you
Ventura,
had, yeah, Ventura and Vince, and Vince playing the total straight man, and Jesse just taking shots at him left and right. That was entertaining. That was something that, especially during the eras where you had 5-minute rest holds going on, guys like Vince with Jesse interacting back and forth between each other, made for entertaining television when, what was going on in the ring wasn't so entertaining, or was slower. You could still count on the announcing crew to keep you entertained and involved in the match. Now it is just pap. It's just pablum that I just literally have going on in the background, and I'm not paying any attention to what they're saying. I'm just not. I sometimes I even just put it on mute and will just see the action. Of course, then I turn away for a commercial, and 8 minutes goes by, and I usually wind up changing the channel to something else, and then come back and the match is ended, or they're doing another promo or something like that. So that's obviously one of the bigger problems with the. Now, one of the things that came during the 5 years during our show was the authoring of your book, and
yes.
I was hoping, maybe as we have a couple minutes left, that you could read a story from your book for all of us, and then we can sign off for the evening.
I'd be happy to. Since we're on the theme of indie wrestlers who don't end well, I picked a story. It's called Xavier on the Q28 bus. This is from my new book, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. It's 100 short stories, and this is one of them.
99
Xavier,
now. Yes, now you only get 3.99.
Xavier on the Q28 bus. I met Xavier nearly a quarter century ago when he was a hungry kid who everyone on the circuit realized was on the way up. My buddy Tiger Khan introduced us before one of the countless New York area cards they were both on. He was gracious, friendly, and humble, yet ever so serious about his goals and dreams. He was going to make it in the wrestling business. We shared a few rides to and from shows together with Tiger, but I can't honestly say I ever knew him well. Yet there was always that warm hello and handshake whenever our paths would cross. And he did indeed climb the ranks to main event on ICW and other local shows. He had some genuinely excellent matches with Low Key and other standouts. I was ever so jaded, but you just had to take note of someone that good climbing the ladder that quickly. In short, he was a good-looking kid in great shape with drive and talent to match. It seemed the world was his oyster. And not all that surprising. The next thing you knew, he was an early Ring of Honor star and even their champion. Local boy makes good. We were proud. But then there were injuries, momentum slowed because of them, and what amounted to Ring of Honor comebacks. Although there were WWE TV appearances, they were losses and cameos in silly skits that didn't do him justice. Maybe he was deemed too small for their taste at the time, or they didn't realize what they had in him. Shoot ahead years later, and I'm on the Q28 bus in Flushing, a bunch of stops from my teaching gig. I had always juggled teaching, film, wrestling, and everything else, but I was taken aback to see Xavier standing not far from me on the very same bus. I suppose in the back of my mind, I just assumed he was off wrestling someplace and conquering new worlds. Recognizing me, a smile came on his face. Looking a bit older, I realized he wasn't a kid anymore. Hey, how you been? I asked. Then the obvious question, how's the wrestling going? He told me he had taken some time off from wrestling. There were injuries and rehab for them, and that he was getting into MMA. He seemed excited by the prospect. But with all the hustle and bustle on the crowded bus, endless background noise, announcements and chatter, it wasn't like I was putting all the pieces of his career together between Main Street and Northern Boulevard. This is my stop. Have to get to work, he told me as the bus started to pull to the curb. A world-class athlete who was great enough to more than hold his own with an AJ Styles, he was instead rushing to his day job. It bothered me. A quickie fist bump later, a final nod and smile, and he was on his way, getting off Flushing's noisy and packed Q28. I didn't hear much about him in recent years, but he was supposed to make yet another ROH appearance in 2020 until the pandemic stopped that too. It seemed to me that in a just world, Xavier could have been on a WrestleMania, once again with AJ Styles, wowing a far larger crowd than he ever got to perform before. Instead, like Tiger Khan preceding him, John Xavier tragically died before his time with dreams unfulfilled. Fate wasn't kind to either. One can only wonder what could have been. So, there's another story about an indie great who did not get all that he had worked for and deserved, and life isn't fair, and that's one of 100+ stories in the book, and
that was magnificently written and a really
you.
great tribute to him. I hope wherever he is, he understands that people recognize that he tried, and unfortunately, the floor is littered with the bodies of guys who tried to entertain us and wanted to make the big time.
Well,
they just couldn't do it.
He's like like Tony Jones on the West Coast. That's an equivalent, like a guy who had all the talent and looks and drive and got to a certain level and just didn't get to that next level, unfortunately.
People just don't realize how tough a business it really is. And, that's why we have this forum here. And I've always felt that we have a responsibility. You and I have a responsibility as the industry has made us opportunities to do things that we never thought we'd ever be capable of when we were younger, And I always felt wrestling was a closed circle. You know, if I didn't live in Connecticut, if I didn't live in the South, that no one would ever be interested in what I thought about wrestling. You know, and even though you're in the center of all of it in New York, it's not like people just handed you opportunities to be involved in wrestling. You had to make it yourself. You
But
had to.
what happens is you have to be in it to win it. And I did an early sheet, Wrestling Then and Now. Because of the sheet, a radio host on a 50,000-watt station who happened to love wrestling, he invited me onto radio. Because of radio, I started meeting these legendary wrestlers, and I started to be an agent. And because I was an agent, I just kind of fell into doing the wrestler, which got me into film. And one thing always leads to another. It's when, these geniuses who just sit all day venting on Facebook, the soldiers in the imaginary WWE versus AEW fanboy war, that's not going to lead to anything. You have to you have to network and, strive
Yeah,
for
oh yeah,
something.
no, I agree. I mean, I wrote a wrestling game in high school, and then from high school, I in my government class, I actually gave a report on the first WrestleMania because I told everybody, hey, that's going to be a part of history. You know, WrestleMania is going to be a part of American history. Just you watch. And my government teacher, who was really super nice, was like, he's right, you know. He's right about wrestling. And the other students are like saying, "Why are you letting him give a talk about wrestling?" I said, "Yeah, you just keep watching. You're gonna see it's gonna be a big deal." And he was right about that. And then I went on to a college radio station where I did wrestling updates on the Hump Show, and from that, I got my opportunity at All Pro Wrestling in the 2000s, and all of this stuff was just stuff I decided to make myself or try to put it out there myself, including this show. You know, you and I just said, let's just do it. You know, we're stuck at home. But I was going stir crazy like The Shining, getting stuck with my family. I was really all work and no play makes, Russ a dull boy type thing. And you were stuck in your apartment building with no place to go. And even walking outside in the hallway was like a possible death sentence for
Our
you.
porter in our co-op died of COVID. That's how close to home it was. Nice guy in his 50s, family guy with kids. It was a brutal period, and I'm glad we started this show. And again, it's not always about money. We don't have a huge audience by any means, and so what? We're doing something different. We just pour our hearts out. We have wonderful guests when we have guests on, and I'm not going to sit here and I don't even want to watch 10 hours a week of WWE to overanalyze it, let alone devote another show out of a zillion, oh, look at that angle. Look at that angle on
But I want
WWE
to
this week.
thank all of our listeners over the years who've stuck with us. Yeah, we don't have a million hits or anything like that, but we do have a lot of dedicated people that look forward to our show every week. I talk to them, and I have good friends of mine who, have listened to every show that we've ever done. And that to me means a lot. And it's another reason that I keep going. And some Sunday nights I'm like, oh, so dragging, and I've been tired and gone a bunch of different places, and I don't even know what we're going to talk about, or we have guests that cancel at the last second or anything like that. And there's frustrations, sometimes the show doesn't record right, or I had that one show that got completely lost by Skype when the power went out right before I had a chance to hit stop recording. And there's all of that stuff, and I don't earn any money doing this, and yet still it's a fantastic thing, and I wouldn't take it back for anything. And each one of these shows, even the one with the Metal Maniac, is priceless to me. They're all special
I
little
find
moments
him
for me.
entertaining.
I
I
know,
like
but
him.
that was you notice he hasn't been asked back as a guest on the show, and I can't listen to Journey anymore without being somewhat scarred by that interview. But needless to say, every one of these shows that we've done has been special to me, and if it wasn't for you encouraging me and saying, yeah, you want to do this thing, and being here to vent and give your opinions on stuff over all these years, this show wouldn't have happened. So I want to extend my own personal thanks to you, Evan, for your dedication and devotion and being here week after week. Yeah, you've had some weeks off and everything, but that's fine. It's You've contributed so much, not just in what you've said, but in your legitimacy, in your reputation, in bringing guests of high renown. I've loved all the guests that you've brought on the show, and you've done a great job, and I think you've done a lot for them too. And I really want to thank you for that.
Well, it's a
In 5 years,
community. Yeah, and I appreciate everything you do. And it's this, I'll tell you, especially during COVID, it was a very stressful and sad time, and this show was one of the bright lights. And I'm
I agree.
grateful. I'm grateful to you as well. And yeah, it's a wrestling community, and it may be like a dysfunctional family picnic at times, the wrestling community, but I've met some of the greatest people in my life through wrestling, and I'm grateful to that as well. And I have 100 stories because I've met an awful lot of people over the years. You know, not all through wrestling, but a lot of them through wrestling. And just the other day, Tommy Rich is sitting in my apartment and in my classroom, and you kind of like pinch yourself. It's like as a kid. I saw Tommy Rich at the Garden, and it was a big deal. The NWA stars coming to Madison Square Garden. He's on the back page of the program, and the people you become friends with and bond with, and you're on the road with them, and it's the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. And it's like any other. It's like any other industry. There's real pluses and real minuses. It's
Well, working
it,
with you has been one of the great pluses in my wrestling career, and I wanted to thank you, thank all the viewers that have watched us over the years, and we're headed for some big things, and we'll be talking about that next week with Angel Orsini, and she's going to be telling us all about her big plans for wrestling and
The
everything
next
that's to
five
come.
years, we're going to be huge, and we're going to devote the entire show to reviewing Raw. I'm kidding.
Yeah, maybe,
I'm
or
kidding.
maybe in the next 5 years, maybe I'll find a way to come out to New York and we can do the show live. That'd be something.
You're
That'd be
more than
something.
welcome. It'd be fun.
We'll have to find a time to do it. Anyway, thank you so much for everyone, and a happy 5 year anniversary to you. All right, we'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone.
Bye bye. Hello?